let's get going because we've got quite a lot to get through today. We've got questions at the end, so feel free to ask questions in the chat. We'll try to get to them. If not, we've got the last sort of 15 minutes of the call. We can get through the questions then. And if all else fails, we'll follow up with specifics, and we can have chats and stuff if there's sort of things you actually want to go through. So let's get going. A bit about us. So my name's Tom. I'm the head of SEO here at Fresh Egg. I've been working agency side for sort of 15 years now, so the important years of SEO, missed sort of the black hat, link spam, and all of that kind of stuff, or actually came into it right at the end. But yeah, I've been looking at AI search sort of since it first came out, and it's kind of led us to where we are today.
I'm Will. I've seen a couple of familiar names in the chat, so sorry to rehash who I am for you all. But yeah, SEO director at Fresh Egg. I started looking at AI about 3 years ago now, kind of got on my radar with Google I/O presentation. I started talking about it a lot more in depth, and we've been scrutinizing it ever since.
So a bit about Fresh Egg, just to get us going. So we are a design, build, and optimize agency. We've been going for 25 years. SEO has always been a part of our services, so very much at the core of what we're doing. We're partners with Optimize, we're Google Merchant partners. We have multiple services within the agency, so SEO, content design, everything you can see on the screen. And we work with a range of clients in different sectors. So plenty of experience across the different sectors today. I know we've got quite a few people from sort of education, charities, insurance, B2Bs, all the way to sort of e-commerce and sectors. So AI search. So AI search is the biggest topic at the moment. So everyone is talking about it. I guess towards the end of the year, going into 2026, it's becoming even bigger. Some of you may have been at Brighton SEO last week or seen some of the slides. I think we worked it out. I think there's about 70% of the slides, or sorry, 70% of the talk that Brighton SEO were mentioning about AI search. So it's definitely something that we need to be looking at right now. A recent stat that sort of 91% of decision makers have asked about AI, and I'm sure there's stakeholders within your own companies that have been talking about it as well. So again, a reason to start thinking about how you get on board with it, how you start using it, and also sort of how you start to see sort of how your brand's performing, and also how you can influence that as well. When we're looking at this shift, it's still quite small in its infancy, but it is growing, and it is significant growth in terms of what we're looking at. So still Google rules the roost in terms of there's still a huge market dominance there. 93% of the market in the UK market are using Google, but the significant shift is that is falling. So that's fallen by 1.1% since August 2024. And globally, Google is flipped to 89% of market share, which is the first time it's been sub 90% since 2010. So it's quite a significant shift in terms of the small amount of time that AI has been around and these LLM tools have been around. It's making up in terms of people are shifting over to different platforms, and demographically there's a shift as well. So that's why we're here today. So we've got a few things that we're going to be looking at today in terms of what do we need to know about AI search and in relation to the website, how we can get started with AI search tracking today, what's the prompt, are these even worth tracking, and what tactics can we actively use to implement AI search on site and influence the outcome. I'm going to hand over to Will to do a bit of background on AI search.
Cool. I thought I'd start my section with a nice big old chart to get everyone hooked. AI is growing massively. That shouldn't be news to anyone on this call. You've all joined the call, so you all have at least a passing interest in AI. But the number of people using AI tools specifically is growing massively and predicted to grow more as it becomes more popular and mainstream. The breakdown of people using AI, it is overwhelmingly Google AI overviews, purely because of their prevalence within all Google searches, but ChatGPT at kind of 2.3 can't even say that, 2.5 billion, is that? Queries per day. So it's not just one-off queries, people are having longer conversations. I'll break down some of those acronyms for us a little bit later as we go, so we're more familiar with them. But I just wanted to convey that we used to live in a world, website, kind of two channels to get to the user. Realistically, I know there are some subsections, Yandex and so on and so forth, but it used to be two. Now it's not. It's absolutely not. People are coming in through a variety of different sections effectively. And people aren't using traditional search in the same way either. Traditional search has a reputation for being a little pay to win more and more as time's gone on. AI has really kind of stepped in to fill that gap in a lot of people's minds. They're not seeing the paid ads at the top currently. People are just getting more and more familiar with it. So it is a growth sector, certainly. For most sites, clicks have been declining from traditional searches despite search volumes increasing. More questions are being answered and are just being given to the users at the point of search. So traffic is increasing. Volume is increasing in Google search particularly, but those clicks that are driving through nowhere near as frequently as they once were. And they are reporting growth in traffic though, many websites, directly from AI models. So we're seeing 5 to 20% inbound traffic from AI platforms. 58% of consumers have replaced traditional search engines with generative AI for products and services recommendations. This is despite the fact it's currently used a lot for computational information, things like that. It is still massively growing and a notable factor. Brand searches specifically are coming off the back of AI searches. So people are seeing AI searches, doing a lot of research at that stage, and then still coming through traditional search at a later time, further down the funnel. It is far from game over from search, though. I don't want that to be the message people take away from this event. Organic search does still get clicks. It's just a different stage in that user journey. So organic gets the click once the research has been done using the AI journey. It just forms a different part of that funnel. It's worth noting in our kind of intro to AI and what's going on there that new browsers are coming in. This OpenAI Atlas has come in, I think it was mid last month. It hit Macs and PCs. They are new, they are fresh, and they are arriving with AI built in as their kind of primary function. So for searching, for analyzing pages, just interacting with the internet generally. I will say that reports have suggested that this browser in particular can be a little slow for everyday activities, but like I said, it's worth noting it's only a month old. These things are iterating rapidly. So we're just seeing them evolving as time goes on. So this type of approach that we're seeing is only going to be expanding in time. Based on that, annual visitors by source, the trends we're seeing are quite evident in this graph. So LLMs, including Google's AI, is the orange line at the bottom, increasing year on year on year. Traditional Google organic search is decreasing. We will talk more about that though, because it's not the kind of doom and gloom picture for SEO that it kind of looks like it will be. It's just a different search behavior that we need to react to effectively. So AI search, or GEO, is an acronym we've seen used a lot. People are still trying to work out some of the acronyms around these things, versus traditional SEO. So AI search, we're optimizing for citations, so references to websites, building awareness within the models, because not all conversations with AIs do result in a click-through, and they shouldn't. And again, influencing AI responses. Whereas with traditional SEO, we're effectively looking to optimize traffic 100% of the time, building off page authority and trying to appear highly in search results. Before we moved on, I wanted to clarify two acronyms that we've heard a lot. AI overviews versus LLMs. So AI overviews, or AIOs, are this screenshot on the left, They appear in search results, and you've probably seen them a lot. Whereas LLMs, language learning model type responses, are this type of response to a question that you typically see in GPT or Gemini or elements like that. So a quick breakdown of what they look like. AIOs kind of generate summary style answers to the top search results. Traditionally, if you're losing some of your organic traffic, this is probably what's taking it more often than not. It pulls from content that's already indexed, so uses that Google indexing for the Google AIOs. LLMs operate slightly differently, though. They generate a response from scratch using trained knowledge. And it's, like I said, it's pulling a mixture of information sources from across the web to generate them in every single instance. Well, you already know loads about AIOs, in truth. Google AIOs rolled out in America several years ago, but in the UK more recently, in the last year and a half. We know a lot of information. That data is already included in Google Search Console. If you've got access to your Search Console, which I'm hoping you should. The queries that are driving them, how often you appear for them, is all in there. On top of that, there's a lot of tools out there, like we've demonstrated here, SEMrush, SERank, ActRanker. The way they operate is they conduct the searches you ask them to, and they record what they find there. So as a result of that, they've got the opportunity and already show when you appear for them, what types of queries you're appearing for. So by cross-referencing that information with Search Console, we can determine what types of queries you're seeing, what types of clicks are driving them potentially, and things like that. So that AIO information is already out there. AI search within LLMs is a bit of an unknown, in truth. They're a little bit of a black box. So unlike Google or Bing, where we can look at their data and get the information specifically out of it with regards to what you've appeared for, LLMs do not do that. Like I said, they are a black box. However, you can assess it and still approach it from a position of looking at how they represent you and how likely you are to appear in them. And that's the real crux of how we should be looking to address it. So looking at the terms that indicate your efficacy within the LLMs is going to be the key driver. With regards to the knowledge kind of level on AI overviews, not AI overviews, sorry, AI generally, there's typically 5 stages that we categorize that. I won't read them all out in real time because that's not what we're here for. But typically, most brands are in awareness, which is I'm aware of them, I know there is visibility out there for it, or the stage 2 exploration. So starting to monitor and test, looking at the data that's already driving it. We'll talk about methods to do that a little bit later on. But that's where people typically sit. And when I say people, I say this to kind of contextualize where people on this call are. But specifically, I want to kind of benchmark you against your competitors. Because when competitors are sitting in stage 1 and 2, if you're moving into stage 3 where you're integrating and things like that, that's where you can get a competitive advantage. And to actually kind of quantify that a little bit, I, in theory, have a poll that we can fire just to kind of highlight that. Bear with me one moment. I'm going to fire a poll off quickly, just to kind of get a benchmark for where you all are. I can see the results and rapidly coming in. Perfect. Wow, a rapid responses. I don't think you can see the answers to this, but realistically, it is a kind of 54% are in stage 2, 33% are in stage 1. There are some outliers into stage 3 and a couple of outliers in stage 4 even. Point being that most people are in that stage 1 and stage 2 category. So you're kind of looking at, you're aware of what AI is, you're looking at benchmarking and data surrounding it. we can help you move up forwards through to stage 3 and stage 4 even to help push it forward. A little bit of the vocab coming up next, just for kind of future references. Got a screenshot for you just so we can talk about what these things are, just so when we're talking about specific elements. Effectively, when we're doing a prompt, the prompt, when I say prompt, it's the query in old money, and it's the question you're asking. The response is the holistic answer that an LLM will give you. Mentions are where they specifically talk about you, but don't necessarily have a link, whereas the citation is specifically where they are linking to you from a piece of information. And that can appear in both the kind of text itself and the side panel. So translation table just over here. So when we're using vocabulary in future. So yeah, research shows that people are moving in that direction. So people are moving from the traditional Google search, which is an average of 9.2 keywords, to more GPT is much longer. It's much more conversational than it once was. AI results also build on the previous conversations and the previous queries you've asked for. So to think of them as singular one-off queries isn't necessarily the best way to do it, because people will, like I said, iterate through several versions of a conversation before they get to the point where they want to click through. I will say even traditional SEO doesn't work in that kind of old school way where we're just looking at a single one-off conversation. Single one-off query. Old SEO, Google specifically builds on and iterates, focuses on what content you've looked at before and how to get it better content for you. So yeah, traditional search, multiple queries, multiple brand touch points. They'll conduct a lot of queries, look at your site, go back and query something else, look again at your site, and again and again and again. The key difference for AI when we're optimizing for it is it drives many fewer clicks. It will answer questions there and then. It will kind of inspire them to ask a new question and again and again and again. But you will only get the click at the last touch point when people are at a more confident point to convert on whatever kind of their objective is. That's relevant because effectively that's where we're seeing a decrease in kind of contacts through traditional metrics. People are kind of seeing and refining, getting the information earlier and only clicking through at a later time. So a kind of summary of what we've kind of described in my rapid-ish intro to AI. Organic clicks are down, but not for the things that really matter to you. Organic clicks, traditionally, we're seeing are down in kind of blog content, top of funnel things, and that's okay to an extent because they're still giving those clicks to pages that do matter, the converting clicks, the points of kind of transaction. And some content will show you the right answers for the searches that matter. But like I said, not all content needs a KPI related to its view. In the world of AI, you will have pages that just demonstrate you are an appropriate source of information and give information to the AI that kind of floats you as a name that later will convert to a click to your normal core pages. Now, those pages, when you're looking at GA4 and things like that, will not be getting impressions, or they will not be getting clicks, but they will be adding real value. So we need to look at other metrics around how we do that. I didn't mention it, but ChatGPT and specifically Google is also about to roll out AI agents. Worth putting on your radar because it's important for how sites function. Agents effectively allow you to tell ChatGPT to act as if it was a human being and go and look at a website. It will do all the kind of going through the pages, finding the information on the user's behalf, and go to the point where it can take the action they want. So it's another arm of AI that's critical from a digital marketing perspective, and especially critical when we're thinking about how your website appears to these AIs. It was about e-commerce making the shift into AI. Effectively, what I was saying was that OpenAI now has a full integration with Shopify. So if you're running an e-commerce store through Shopify, the experience that your users will now be able to get is a full conversation through ChatGPT, where you can start a conversation about what your requirements are, get recommendations, more specific, until it eventually says, well, actually, you should buy this dazzling red blazer for the Christmas party. Do you want me to buy it for you? I'll say yes. It will bill me from the card it's already got on file. The blazer will appear at my door. I will never go to the site. Two things to think about for that. One, that's actually still quite good for the site in question. They still get my purchase. They still get their money. But the important factor is that they still have to really optimize that journey for AI specifically. So they need to make sure that they are at the point when that decision is being made, and the AI can kind of fully integrate with their checkout process. So it has a good kind of conversion experience. You're not going through too many intricate questions and the like. The other thing I wanted to highlight is that just outside of the scope of digital marketing, AI is evolving in the kind of society we live in. During the research I've been doing over time, we have encountered this EU Artificial Intelligence Act, rolled out last year, but I just wanted to highlight it, not because granularity and, I'm not a solicitor, things like that, but there is legislation coming in. It's becoming a part of the offline world, and it's kind of rapidly evolving through a variety of channels. Again, sorry about the downtime there. I'm going to pass you over to Tom, who's going to talk to you about the data specifically.
Perfect. So we'll go through these slides relatively quickly because I want to get to the more important sections, which are the actual tactics that we can start using, as well as sort of what we want to achieve with AI search, so prompt tracking, all that kind of stuff, which I think is more important. So this is a representation of what your site might look like right now. AI traffic being relatively small in terms of the total number. So in this example, it's actually only 0.04%. All other channels actually have like 99%. So you're rightfully thinking that AI is still relatively small, but it is growing. So if we look at that isolated, we can see over like the last year at least, there's been growth. And a lot of that growth is actually converting as well. So stats coming out about AI visits, you've probably seen a varied number here. We're seeing ourselves that there's an increased conversion rate coming from AI visits from our own clients, but it's about 3 to 8% better than organic search. So it's got every reason to be focused on sort of AI in terms of it's isolating that user journey. So traditional search would normally go through sort of 20 touch points for a website. It could be days before someone makes a decision. We're finding that people are actively integrating with large language models. They're having the conversation, and that consideration stage and actually going through to the buying stage actually happens relatively quickly. And also then coming to the website happens relatively quickly as well. So there's a lot less action in terms of your website and consideration and interaction and touch points, but actually the whole process is done. So that's why it's really important that AI search knows about your brand. ChatGPT is dominant in the market, so we are seeing a ton of market share in terms of in terms of the models itself. What we would say about this is make sure your demographic is using the tool that we would most likely see. So we're seeing tools like Microsoft Copilot increase. So whilst it's relatively small at the moment, they are actively increasing. Usage of tools like Claude, especially in sort of the B2B or the SaaS space, might be more prevalent. So just make sure that you're not just going after one of these, and we're having a cross-reference across all the large language models. So yeah, ChatGPT dominates in terms of 80% of search traffic referrals are actually coming from ChatGPT at the moment, but there are others in the market as well. So it's just making sure that we are looking at each of the sources. When it comes to each of the models themselves, we actually do see differences as well. So, for example, ChatGPT loves to reference sites like Wikipedia and Reddit. So the citations that we see across the sort of prompts is much larger on sort of the Wikipedia, Reddit, TechRadar, Tom Guide for those high authority sites. When looking at Perplexity, we see that there's a bigger sway towards Reddit, so that first-hand user content. TripAdvisor and Yelp and Forbes also come up on complexity, and then Google AI mode, shock horror, it's referencing itself quite a bit. So it references Google, it references YouTube quite a bit. So we are seeing differences when it comes to the models. So it's important, again, when you're looking at the models and the large language models, it's important to have that sight on sort of all of them, or the main ones at least, rather than sort of just putting all your eggs in one basket and seeing ChatGPT as a leader. So how do you keep an eye on them? So there's ways you can get started today. So as we saw with sort of that maturity model, some of you might have data that you can start using today. So Google Analytics, if a majority of you using Google Analytics, anyone that's on Adobe Analytics, it's a similar process. So you get your source data, so we can see source data. You can put in a regex similar to what we've got on the screen there. And you can start to see sort of what traffic is actually being driven from large language models straight away. So you can get that data, you can put it into your own report. So Looker Studio, you can bring that out, and you can start to see that data. You may also have AI overviews, as Will said earlier. There's many tools that sort of give you that access to AI overviews. You might see a chart like this where there's a massive disparity in terms of appearance of AI overviews for your appearance of AI overviews versus sort of that orange line where those are the actual AI overviews you're appearing in. So that gap there between the blue and the orange line, that's all opportunity as well. So when we're looking at AI search, large language models is obviously what we're focused on today, but there's also this whole focus around AI overviews themselves and saying, is there a gap there? Should we be looking to appear in sort of those AI overviews as well? New metrics you should be looking at. So when we're specifically talking about large language models, there's new metrics we should be looking at. There's a number of different tracking tools. We've done our research, we've had tests with a number of these tools, and there's many more available and there's many more coming onto the market. The main thing when you're trying to look at a tool is make sure it fits sort of budget, make sure it makes sense to you in terms of the way that it's explained. Does it make sense? Can you translate that back to the key stakeholders within the company in terms of how they use it? Because there are differences in terms of how they track. And make sure it gives you what you need in terms of that visibility. So that main thing is that visibility on sort of how you're doing an AI search. Does it allow you to track what you need to track? Does it give you a clear insight? Does it give you clear information? So the main metrics we've got here are sort of AI visibility. So this is your main metric that we're looking at in terms of when it comes to AI search. So how visible are you? Are you appearing in prompts when they're being shown up?
Question from the chat. Sorry, asking on the previous slide, does SEMrush have that, or is it a specific tracking tool?
So SEMrush does have it. It's an additional bolt-on. So if you have a license to SEMrush, I think they're starting to show part of that data.
Yeah.
In their overall visibility tools that you might have access to, but there's an additional bolt-on that you might have to also purchase to start tracking sort of individual prompts. The next key metric is brand mentions. So this is in prompts themselves. So how often is your brand being mentioned? Are you more visible than your competitors? Citation rate, so the number of citations you're actually being answered for. So when a prompt gets triggered, how many times is your brand being mentioned in that particular prompt? And then sentiment score. And sentiment score is actually really important. So there's a lot of things you can do with sentiment score in terms of when you appear. It's not just about the visibility, but it's what is AI saying about your brand and how can you influence that, but also how can you keep an eye on sort of your sentiment score and make some actions. So negative sentiments, for example, is there ways that you can find those citations? Is there ways you can look at those sources and potentially look at updating them? So there's ways that we can do ways that we can look at this over time. And
cool.
Back to Will.
I appreciate that. I appreciate Tom's section is very data centric and sheds a lot of really quantifiable insights. The section's a little bit more actionable without that specific data. There are some tools in here, but it should all be just relevant kind of strategic stuff on top of that. I just wanted to clarify that AI doesn't see your website as a single standalone entity. And it doesn't see the pages that way either. And it is incorrect to think that it is trying to be like a human in the sense that AI will judge your site based on everything it knows about it, everything it's ever heard about it. Like you don't think about your local Tesco in the sense that you've looked at their website, that is the only information you're getting. You think about it in the sense that you've seen recommendations, past experience, you've seen their adverts on TV. It's a whole network of information, and you need to think about your site in that same way. So it will prioritize the things that people on the internet specifically have talked about it finding important to your market. So for example, if you work in a very time-sensitive industry and your reviews all say, actually, you've got an incredible response rate, it will promote you based on that. So it does do it contextually based on a network of information that your site is, like I say, it's just sitting at the peak of. Think about where else you are online. That line underneath that, if you're unfamiliar with that, that is my favorite Google search of all time. Granted, I've simplified it, but effectively the way it works is if you put in your brand name in quotes, then minus your own domain and minus any other domains that you control. So if you've got YouTube channels or Facebooks and things like that, it will do a search of the internet, finding any reference to you that you don't own. Effectively producing things like this. This is the University of East Anglia. This is where chat AI is getting its information from, in addition to your website. It highlights kind of core areas if you think you need to action that. And you need to look at those and think about what it is that they're saying about you, what it is that they're doing specifically, if it's comparisons, if it's user information like Reddit, that's going to be a huge place to look at when you're looking at what it is that people are going to think about you, because that's what LLMs are trying to understand. Do this on your own website. Also, you can do it on your competitors' websites as well, just to ensure that you can understand the marketplace you're operating in. Find out who your competitors are, find out yourself, do this search purely to find out, like I said, what the sentiment is about you, what the conversations are being held, and specifically what LLMs will get as their inputs when they're making these decisions about you and when and how to show you. Make sure that they can access your website. That sounds really, really simple, but they can't access everything yet. I say yet, I mean, you know, Elon Musk's trying to put chips in our brains. It'll access everything one day. But your site needs to be clear. It needs to be transparent to LLMs. And information needs to be readily available to users and the AI trying to understand it. Like I said, that your website is part of a network, but your website, as I said, is the core of it. If you're not giving AIs the opportunity to A, read it and understand it all, and B, kind of navigate it and use it effectively for their kind of agent modes and conversions, then it's not going to work. What it means is effectively minimize JavaScript, which we'll talk about in a moment, but you need to ensure the crucial bits are available. Subdomains aren't really your friend. Google LLMs don't have a great of understanding as the relationship between them. It doesn't necessarily think that you are one and the same. So, you know, think twice if you do need a subdomain. I say that fully understanding, having worked in this industry for some time, that there are use cases for subdomains. If you need a different tech stack and things like that, don't shy away from them, but do like kind of resist them where possible. And iframes, frankly, might as well not exist on your website. An iframe is essentially a little window into someone else's website. The most common one that 99% of people on the call will be familiar with is the YouTube iframe, which is a good use of an iframe, but it's essentially a window that lets people see YouTube's website on your website. LLMs don't understand those to be part of your website. It's just someone else's website that you're kind of letting people see. So think about what you're using them for. If you're using them for other situations, if you're putting quizzes or any other complex elements like that, where possible, see if you can get them built into your website where the LLMs will attribute that benefit to you specifically. And as I said with JavaScript, AI crawlers don't really like it. They don't really interact with it. Frankly, it's because of the amount of information they're having to consume and understand so rapidly, and the mass that it contains for each query, each prompt independently. Realistically, JavaScript takes a lot of time to kind of put together. It's quite resource intensive for them, so they don't put as much effort in as they realistically should. So in that sense, try and minimize it. And I know that's a bold statement. There'll be a lot of you, no doubt, that have kind of gone heavily into Next.js, which is understandable. It's frankly a really good user experience. But the takeaway is, where possible, make sure things like on-page text is presented rapidly and in the base source code for each page. Don't necessarily borrow it. Don't make it render last, because that's where people are running into some of their issues. A great way to understand what LLMs can see. I appreciate that this is a tool. There are other tools that do this, but this is the one that I prefer and the one I use most. Screaming Frog has a really good way to see what GPT can use. It's as straightforward as, if you go into the configuration, if you're crawling your site, go down to user agent. In the last couple of versions, they updated it to include ChatGPT user and ChatGPT bot, which arguably are interchangeable for this methodology. If you select this, what you've effectively done is you've told ChatGPT to act and pretend to be GPT in this case, or you could do Perplexity or Claude or any of the variants that you need to test. But act as if you are those crawlers and tell me what you find. If you've got Screaming Frog, you've undoubtedly already got a crawl of your site using traditional methods, being the Google user agent or Screaming Frog's user agent. Use the comparison mode to compare the two. We found some really interesting things for a lot of our clients doing that. We've typically found that GPT is finding fewer pages. On top of that, the word counts it's seeing are typically a little bit lower. And again, the headings, it doesn't always see all of the headings. So it's a really good way to audit your site to determine if the LLMs can realistically see all the information that you're looking to provide. The same with search engines, in the sense that you need to make sure you've provided all of the information, not just to the user, not just in a visual way, which arguably is kind of, our end goal, make sure the users are having a good time, but you need to get it into the LLMs, otherwise they won't fully understand you and they won't know what content to show. A less text-specific way to do that, looking through the agent mode, you'll note that they typically use reading mode. It's not as good as the Screaming Frog method, because the Screaming Frog method will do all of your pages en masse, but reading mode is available in Chrome. It might not naturally be in your toolbar. You can go into three dots and add it in maybe, but it's this symbol here. If you click it, it will just open this big kind of legal pad colored pane, and it will tell you the page you're looking at in a simplified way. That is pretty close, arguably very, very close to how LLMs see your site. Make sure your core information is in there. Make sure your headings are in there at appropriate sizes. The links are appearing in there so the LLMs can see them in the network. It's a really simple way of doing it. And it's just kind of dip check through your core pages just to make sure that they are performing as they should be. Everyone knows about schema in the SEO world, but you can't have a conference without talking about it on AI. Schema is so wildly important to AIs. It effectively helps put your page and what you're writing about in a structure that's really ingestible for crawlers and AI, and Google, to be very, very clear. There's numerous schemas that you can use for it, but there's some that we truly recommend. So if you have questions and answers on your page, FAQ schema is just a way of marking it up to show that relationship between the information. When people are prompting LLMs, they're using questions. So if you're answering those questions and you can show that in a very linear way that's really easy for everyone to understand, that's exactly what you should be doing. Arguably, if you have a page type, have you ever seen a page type that couldn't have a schema before, Tom?
No, I think most of them have schema-related markup now.
Yeah, I was going to say, if nothing else, organization schema is a great opportunity to highlight other places that you appear on the internet. So organization schema tells any crawler looking at your website who you are, where they can find you, telephone number, information like that. also other locations on the internet that you can be found. So it helps build that network between them. Schema does also help Google, which is relevant because ChatGPT in particular uses the top search results as a shortlist for things that it's going to consider within answers. It's like a little bit of a shortcut, effectively. So using schema for things like that, making sure you're positioned highly for those core terms that you're looking for LLM recognition on, absolutely beneficial. I will need to check time because of our impromptu break. I think we're good. We're going to take 5 minutes just so I can get some water, if nothing else. My voice is croaking now. But after the break, just 5 minutes break, we'll talk about future-proofing your visibility, tracking prompts specifically, and what that looks like, and some case studies that we've done with actual kind of takeaways. And then at the end, we'll do questions. I am keeping an eye on the chat on the other window. Questions at the end, we'll go through any kind of themes that have come up consistently. But feel free just to drop any questions you've got. If they're highly relevant, I'll try and flag them in real time as well. Cool. Okay, I will see you after the break. Cool, we're back. Hope everyone took a minute to stretch legs. I saw some interesting questions in the chat during our break. There was one around using AI to track conversions. Sorry, tripped over myself there. There's a question around whether or not you could track conversions through AI using GA4. The answer is yes, I believe. We've seen there's a specific user setup, including a specific screen size and browser and so on and so forth. It's allowed us to quite accurately find AI when they enter sites for kind of conversions or interactions like that, which effectively means they are being tracked in GA. How you can kind of set them as their own dedicated channel is an interesting process to go through. But I'll get back to you in more detail on that following maybe, because there is a setup you can do. There are some other questions in the chat. I appreciate that, and we'll kind of review them and summarize towards the end.
Perfect. So I think we're getting to the point now where, yeah, we've been through some tech setup. So looking at sort of why your site might be invisible to LLMs. Let's go into some more practical strategies that we could look at in terms of how do we increase our appearance in LLMs, as well as how do we look at sort of what we can do to. Sorry, share screen. Yeah, what we can do in terms of increasing our general appearance. I think the main thing when it comes to sort of AI search overall is that we can't lose focus of what our end goals are, and that's with traditional search as well. There's been so many iterations of sort of SEO over the years in terms of looking at visibility, in terms of focusing on sort of backlinks, when really what we should always be focused on when it comes to SEO is what is it doing from your overall objectives? How is it increasing sort of what you're trying to achieve? And in most cases, most people will be looking to achieve sort of conversions, leads, transactions, and revenue. So whilst organic search, traditional organic search feeds into that, as does all the other channels, AI search is also going to be feeding into that. So we need to be looking at it from a perspective of how is AI search and how is our visibility in AI search actually going to feed into those main things, and that's what we're trying to achieve. The fundamentals of SEO remain absolutely crucial for AI search. I don't want to be a broken record because I think we've seen this quite a lot on sort of LinkedIn and other talks. So when we're looking at sort of overall search, you've got sort of these three pillars of technical excellence, content excellence, and off-page excellence, and they're the foundations of great SEO. They're also the foundations of AI search. So those three areas also do play into AI search, and you see sort of an overlap in terms of organic results mimicking sort of AI search results as well in terms of cited sources and where you appear. The additional layer is sort of that learnings you can take from AI search, and then how do you use that information to inform your other strategies? So how do you use AI search and what it's telling you to inform sort of the content side of things, what we should be doing from an off-page perspective, as well as sort of those technical barriers that you might be facing and how we can make those improvements. We very much believe these are the sort of foundations to tracking or appearing in AI search. So the SEO fundamentals are absolutely key. But then you've also got these sort of other four areas. So we've got topical authority and similar to sort of traditional search. So how to increase your expertise or be recognized as the expert in your area. Brand visibility and mention, so making sure you're being mentioned in the right places. So it's not just about sort of increasing your backlinks or increasing the number of times you're appearing in certain websites. It's about, are they topically correct for you? Are they the right vertical for you? Does AI associate those cited sources with sort of the expertise and showing those trust values and that credibility? Industry relevancy, so does it align with your industry trends and expectations? So are there emerging topics? Are we covering sort of the questions your users are asking? This is where sort of Reddit is being so excited and being so focused on in terms of that first-hand user data, plus also the people are asking questions. Traditionally, they're questions that we might not be answering in organic search just because they wouldn't have a lot of search volume associated with them. But there are options for us to be looking at covering topics that we might not cover traditionally for a search perspective, just because it doesn't have the data to back it up. But we'd be looking to cover it from a perspective of AI visibility, and these are the things that users are asking for. And then social signals as well. So whilst we've seen over the last 2 years sort of SEO and CRO crossover a lot more, so with sort of the EAT related phrases, so your expertise, authority and trust signals. Social signals are starting to play a part as well. So are you being mentioned in the right places? Is your social media up to date? Are you promoting content to fuel your brand search? So your brand amplification in terms of how well known is your brand in the industry? Are people actively searching for it? Are you trying to increase your search volume? And then all the monitoring the sentiment as well. So how are you being seen across those social channels? What are people saying about you, and how is that pulling into AI search? So the first thing that we would always look to do is review what AI is saying about your brand. So we know that AI loves generated content, so user-generated content, and it's trying to act like a human. So it goes out and collects this content, and it knows what to think and say. Are you appearing in those spaces? Are you using those topics to drive sort of content on your own website? Are you even talking about these topics at all? We also know what works in AI search. So there's lots of studies that are coming out now in terms of people saying that they've reviewed billions of searches, millions of searches, prompts across different models. So we're starting to get information about what works and what doesn't work. So we know that natural language URLs get 11.4% more citations in AI search. And a lot of this stuff is simple SEO, as it were. But it's also crucial to recognize this, because when we're looking at sort of how we structure our websites and how we look at sort of URLs going forward, we need to make sure they do make sense. So a few examples there are sort of like a non-descriptive URL, a semi-descriptive URL, and a natural language URL. We've always gone down this route of saying don't necessarily, well, do best practices really well. So make sure you're mirroring URLs, sort of how LLMs are describing the topics. I wouldn't probably advise going ahead and changing all your URLs. That's not the best move to make. But if we're looking to create content or looking to sort of update sections of the website, then it's something we could focus on and something you could do to sort of improve your visibility in AI search, and also probably improve your visibility in organic search at the same time. We're seeing a lot of information about meta descriptions coming out and including giving away context to AI models. So with meta descriptions in traditional organic search, we don't focus on them as a ranking signal. They're not necessarily taken into account from that perspective, but they are very much taken into account from a click-through rate perspective. So if your page appears well in organic search, we use meta descriptions to try and entice a click and get more people to click on it. The LLM optimized style is to give away the context of the page, like really make it descriptive. Direct answers equal higher AI citation potential. So it's easy to lift that information for AI search. It's easy to grab it. They love sort of semantic chunks of content, and the easier you can make it for sort of these LLM bots to grab that information, they'll take it and they'll be more often likelihood to sort of cite your source. We've also found studies that being in position 5 to 10 in, I guess, traditional search is actually an advantage when it comes to AI search. So we don't see as dramatic as drop-off rate. So traditional search there in pink, you see sort of position 1 to 3, you see a click-through rate drop-off. So people going directly to your website, you'll see a drop-off as you get sort of down and down and down the list. When it comes to AI search, your likelihood of appearing in citations, if you're appearing in position 5 to 10, you're actually still got quite a good likelihood. So there could be a strategy here in terms of focusing on those pages or focusing on those groups of phrases where you're appearing in sort of a traditional search 11 to 20. If you can improve them slightly and make them better and include all the things that users want to see on those pages, you could see an increase in visibility when it comes to AI search. And obviously the long-term goal is how can we move them forward in traditional search as well. We also know that there's the theme approach in terms of creating a content hub still very much works. So, and it probably works more so when it comes to LLMs. I've seen studies coming out lately where people are saying sort of create 3 or 4 different pages to answer certain topics. But this model very much looks at demonstrating your expertise. So making sure that you're being seen as the expert. If you want to rank for a certain theme, then do you actually have the content that LLM bot would say that you are the expert when it comes to that theme? And it's also about sort of the relationship between those pages as well. So making it easy to understand, making the links very visible in terms of how you're getting from one page to another, and making sure that you've got that topical coverage. The additional layer that we'd add on to LLMs and AI search over sort of traditional search here is that extra layer of the audience-led content. So are there things that you're not covering? Are there topics that your audience might be discussing that you don't have coverage for at the moment? It's all those smaller search queries that you could look at and look at improving in terms of adding that additional content to show that you really are the experts in that area. Comparative content dominates when it comes to AI citations. So when you're looking at sort of the comparative list, we're seeing sort of 25%, and this is completely indicative of how people are looking at AI search at the moment. They're using it to make decisions in terms of if they're at the awareness stage of the buyer's cycle, and they're looking at to make decisions of comparing companies together, or looking at a particular company or a particular brand and making a decision in terms of how they stack up versus something else or another option. So comparative and listicle content is actually coming back in terms of how you use it. We'd say for comparison sites, obviously they dominate in that space, but there are ways that you can do this if you're a single brand where you don't have to mention necessarily competitors. So there's really good examples. We've got a few case studies at the end in terms of things that we've spotted in real world sort of AI search and how you can influence it. So there's one in there about that as well. AI has recency bias. So we know that content that is up to date and fresh is definitely cited more in AI search. So all your content, that content decay that usually is sort of 3 years plus, make sure you're looking to update it and don't just refresh the content in terms of updating the date. So show off that you are updating it, but also make sure you're doing all the other bits that go on top of that. So don't just change publish date. Take time to properly review the content. It's probably a really good time to actually focus more on the audience. Long formed content traditionally that's like 1,500 words and it's got all the headings in there that you usually put in there. Maybe it's time to look at sort of how you can actively make that content more relevant for your audience and make it really easy to understand and really quick to get to that information. Ensure you're adding your value and expertise at the same time. So how can you show off sort of your traditional EEAT metrics? They'll be great for organic search as well. And then what would your audience want to see in terms of, are there things that you're missing out on that you could add in there? There's other elements when it comes to content as well that we can look at. So conversational optimization. So AI, as I've mentioned with meta descriptions, loves chunks of content. So how can you break up your page to really be easy to scrape and grab that information? It probably also makes it easier to read as well. Most of us are lazy when it comes to reading pages, so you don't want blocks of text. You want to grab the information in short chunks. Human creativity to emphasize the unique insights and how you stand out, so how your content stands out versus someone else that might cover that topic as well. How can you add on top of that in terms of your audience? People-centered content. So is there any interviews you can get from your audience? Maybe you can rely on sort of support teams or questions that people typically ask and use that content within your page. And then structured headings. How do you organize your content? So it goes beyond sort of that traditional sort of H1, H2, H3 tag. And it's more about how we're structuring the page to make it easy to read in those semantic chunks, to make it very easy to understand. As we said, like LLMs don't extract, LLMs don't read the entire page. They're looking at sort of the chunks of meaning. So there's other things that we can do within pages themselves. So what ChatGPT prefers over Google. So it loves summaries and it loves questions. So if you could summarize your article, could you add a summary for each paragraph? If you do have a long page, is there summaries you can add to each paragraph that make it really easy to understand? Could you answer the questions up front? So on that right-hand side there, it's saying, could you answer the question? If it's a question-based piece of content, should you answer the question up front and actually then provide the insight and the rest of the information below it? Make uses of tables and charts. So make sure that we're using tables and charts to get to display information, because that, again, that's really easy for AI searches to list. So you can do that really well. And then there's other things that you can do as well. So short sentences, visual points, and data points work really well. The digestible, quotable chunks work really well. So anything where we're breaking the content down and making it very easy to understand is sort of the way to go when it comes to sort of these large language models and how they lift that content. Being seen as credible in terms of AI search. So how do we get seen as credible? So the EEAT factors. So we want to show off really that we are the expert when it comes to an area, plus also we can be trusted. So how do we show that when it comes to AI search? Product guides need to be written by someone that's actually used the product if you're going to go down that route. Expert guides need to be written by an expert. How do you show off you're the expert? So make sure that you're really demonstrating the authorship and why they're specialists in that area and how long they've worked in that industry and sort of the awards they've picked up or sort of anything else that you can show off the expertise. Video transcripts and UGC summaries. So making sure that there's specific anecdotes or outcomes from that as well. I think we've got a question.
Yeah, sorry, I just paused you very temporarily. Someone in chat's asked about avoiding, they've been advised in the past to avoid FAQs, and it's better to just put content on the page, which is quite structured. I think it's worth pointing out that when we say FAQs, sometimes people have a bit of a narrow focus as to what that means. We don't mean accordion boxes specifically. FAQs being like questions and answers, again, as you're already doing, putting them in the heading structure with the text underneath. Absolutely the way we're recommending doing it. And again, FAQ schema can engage with that and just to pull those out for the AI. But we don't mean put all of your content in accordion,
and we're not,
which would actually be very bad advice.
Going back 6 years and
exactly.
FAQ schema and hoping for the best. No, we're very much focused. It's not about like a long list. We're not trying to keyword stuff as it was sort of done those years ago in terms of that. If you had the FAQs, you're going to appear better in organic search. It's more about sort of making sure that you're matching up what the audience wants to see. And those questions should very much be specific to that page as well. How do we show off? I had one. Variable expertise. So there's things that we can do here in terms of the expertise and show the credentials in terms of what we want to be seen as the expert here. So product pages or blogs authored by people that clearly understand the technical or practical aspects of the topic. And then authoritiveness as well, being recognized as a source in your industry. So make sure that you're being cited or summarized in sort of, I say affiliate blogs there, that affiliate's always got a bad name, but blogs that are appearing well in organic search. There'll be specific ones in your particular industry that you'll know about. It doesn't mean go out, pay for links and get placements and that's how you're going to go about it. But it does mean that take notice of sort of what's appearing well in your industry, who are the industry voices, and what can you do to potentially sort of get on their radar, or how can you get cited in there? Are your competitors even there? Because it's always a case of chicken and egg. You don't want to be sort of behind too far versus your competitors, but also you want to be sort of making sure that you are being found where your audience is looking for that content. And then trustworthiness, so making sure that all your information is up to date. So if you've got an e-commerce website, make sure your product information is up to date. The transparency of your content, so make sure you're adding sort of your privacy policies, your return info, any disclaimers that you need to add to that. This SSL certificate, so like HTTPS and SSL certificates, obviously everyone, I hope, fingers crossed, has them in place and they're working, but those are all the quality signals that show off to LLM models, as it does for traditional search, in terms of making sure that you are secure and your website can actually be trusted. So really, what it comes down to is it's crawlability plus clarity plus credibility equals AI visibility. We're not calling it the 3 Cs. We haven't coined that phrase just yet, but I don't know, it could be a thing. So recapping that section, so solid SEO foundations are absolutely crucial. More emphasis needs to be on the areas you're currently not doing. So I think when it comes to sort of AI search, it's not about are you doing it or are you not doing it. It's more about, are you not doing digital PR very well at the moment? Are you not investing heavily into sort of your technical website, or have you got a slow technical team in terms of actually pushing things through that would really help your AI visibility? Create, update, and refresh. So make sure you're spoiling AI search content. Make sure you're absolutely sort of looking at it from an audience lens, but spoiling it in terms of making sure it can read it, it's easy to understand, it's got those chunks of content. Content structures are vital for AI search, so make sure, again, it's focused on that audience base. And then EEAT signals, so similar to what you'd be doing in your organic search strategy as well. Making sure you're really showing off sort of those expertise, authority, and trust signals. And then we're going to go into a bit about prompt tracking. So this is a really key area. And when it comes to prompt tracking, there's 2 schools of thought when it comes to sort of AI tracking overall. So we've got prompt-specific tracking, so looking at specific prompts and the visibility behind that, and I guess the semantics behind it. So measuring where you appear for those specific prompts, or the likelihood that you're appearing. And then it's the whole brand visibility. And I think this is the second bit is really interesting in terms of an area to focus on, in terms of what does AI know about your brand? How are you managing that sort of that entity management in terms of how accurately does it display your information? What associations or topics are linked to your brand? And does your brand appear in sort of AI summaries and citations? So it's the accuracy and the consistency there that are really important in terms of that whole ecosphere of sort of AI search. Is your brand being shown off in the best light it possibly can? So what is prompt tracking, and is it accurate? No. Just like all tracking tools, there's inaccuracies. So we're not saying this is an absolute. We're saying it's a likelihood to appear in that prompt. And there's different ways of doing it. So there's different approaches even to sort of the prompt tracking. How does it work? So again, there's tools out there that do it for you, but it's essentially trying to do sort of real-time user simulation. So making sure it's looking at sort of how a user would activate with the LLM models themselves. We're trying to get consistent data quality, so doing the same thing again in a repeated process. So again, similar to sort of how traditional sort of keyword tracking tools work, they'll do it from the same location just so you get consistent data. And then daily tracking. We've gone across sort of a number of different tools, and they all work differently in terms of how they track. The ones we're most confident about is the daily tracking tools, just because AI search does change on a daily basis. You will see visibility go up and down in terms of how your brand's being seen. It's not the end of the world. It's more about sort of showing that consistency of that appearance. So it's looking from a daily perspective, you can see sort of consistent appearance, whether you're visible or whether you're not visible. And then it's those trends. So it's the trends you want to be tracking and looking at over time. So there's 2 approaches when it comes to tools. So there's a UI scraper. So that's like a traditional user interface, looking at sort of how a user would activate an LLM model and scraping that data. And then there's API access. Again, different tools have different ways of doing it. We found the UI scraping is the better way forward, because that's taking it the same way that a user would be looking at it. And there are differences. The API access, if they're getting active data from prompts and scraping data from API access, it can be different. So make sure that whatever tool you decide to go with down the line, it's looking at sort of which one you're looking at, and you've got that consistency there. When it comes to prompt tracking itself, what we're focused on is sort of, again, back to the overall objectives of what we're trying to achieve. So we're looking at it from a funnel perspective. So the top of funnel is sort of your educational or your informational queries. These are probably lower priority in terms of when we're looking at tracking, because it's the first discovery phase. Is probably not going to end up in a click to the website or a brand search right at this stage, especially with sort of all the different touch points we'd expect to see. But it's very much that entry level, and it could be in a couple of years' time this becomes a real focus. But right now, we think we should be focusing much more on sort of this middle of funnel, in terms of this is informational comparison, brand evaluation prompts, that people looking at your actively starting to seek out a product or service. and understanding why you might be the best choice. So if you're not starting to appear in these types of searches, that's where you're going to be losing out versus your competitors. So we say that's the best place to start your sort of prompt journey and what you should be looking at. And then it's these bottom of funnel phrases as well. So pricing, secondary monitoring. So being visible for your brand information, like is your pricing information accurate? How can you onboard? Do you have a good support network? Do you show off good trust signals? So this information is really vital because someone's probably at the stage where they're absolutely going to sort of make that purchase. They just need to be absolutely sure. So again, tracking sort of brand related phrases is really important. We've got a few examples. I'll whiz through these quite quickly. So we've got pet insurance examples. So this is an example of top, middle, and bottom funnel of what we'd look for there. So like middle of funnel there is best pet insurance for older dogs UK, or compare brand to brand 2, brand 1 to brand 2. We've got a removal company. Again, we're looking at comparison phrases. Those bottom of funnel phrases are more related to sort of like how you book that house removal with the particular brand, or how long does brand 1 take to pack up my home, because those are things that people want to know, especially going for a stressful time as well. And then we've got an SEO agency as well. So top SEO agencies for B2B, brand 1 versus brand 2, and then again, the agency price related phrases.
I was going to say, Tom and I have spoken some amount about how it's not as linear as it looks without writing up. The diagram for this is actually much more loopy. Those top of funnel phrases going into middle of funnel, frequently people go back to top of funnel and refine, and go back to middle and refine. So you might go for wanting to know about what's important for health insurance. They say these following things are important compared to one another. Then you go back to top funnel and say, what is that thing? For loop several times before you actually drop down to the bottom of the funnel. So there's a lot of kind of search refinements as well to consider at that stage.
We'll just, because of time constraints, we'll skip over this one. I'm assuming everyone, or we can do it in the chat, I guess, how many prompts should you or will you be tracking if you're not doing it right now? Because there's no necessarily right answer. It's just interesting to see sort of what people are thinking at the moment. So we'll skip over that. If you want to put your answers in the chat, we can review it as we're going through. But what we're looking at when it comes to prompt tracking as well, so we've got the funnel approach, and then we've got sort of these 3 core categories that we're looking at. So it's informational based, so your best and your top rated. We've got your comparison based phrases, so like your alternatives to certain brands. Alternatives really interesting, the same as better. So if they see a brand appear once, or they see your brand appear, and they're looking for those, I guess, alternatives, or the price point might not be right, making sure that you're being visible in those kinds of searches is really important. And then your brand-based phrases. So again, that entity management side of things, in terms of, is your brand being represented as well as it can? Is it giving off those trust signals? And then when it comes to actually the number of prompts you want to track, this is going to change. This is where it's going to evolve even further over the next year to 2 years, I would imagine. So I would imagine most people, as we said right at the start, you're sort of in that stage 1 or stage 2. You want to get to stage 3 and start in terms of start tracking prompts. You don't need to start tracking 100 prompts straight away. We're saying that most people will be around sort of 20 to 50 prompts is a good starting place, because that will give you a good proportional representation of where you appear. You can look at sort of your key topics on that front. You can look at those compare phrases. You can look at sort of your brand phrases as well. So I've listed a couple of examples of different industries on this diagram on the right-hand side. So like a small charity, for example, there'll be lots of informational queries there. You won't want to track all those informational queries, but you will want to track sort of like how you appear in the space of that charity, how we can help people, how people are finding you, making sure that you're giving the right information away. So you'll probably do a lower amount of prompts to begin with, versus the e-commerce store. So you've got a large e-commerce store, you've got lots of products, you've got lots of categories. You want to know if you're appearing for these top selling products versus your competitors. You're probably likely to have a lot more prompts being tracked versus sort of like a smaller charity. So it will differ, and I'm sure this space will grow in terms of as prompt tracking, I guess, becomes more established, and we get more established in terms of like a leader in that space, as it were. We'll probably have more ideas around that. It's also a price point as well. So prompt tracking is quite expensive at the moment in most parts. So you won't want to be tracking sort of those 100+ phrase prompts because it does rack up.
So it's making sure that you're sort of comfortable in terms of you're covering enough topics, and also sort of you're getting that you're making sure that you've got that visibility mapped out. Where can you get prompts from is really interesting. So Search Console gives you some information in terms of what your best performing pages, what they're appearing for. Reddit and forums we've mentioned before, Keyword Planner, and more so, I guess, organic search, those question-based phrases and people also ask are really interesting because we know that's what people are looking for. And internal teams, so sales and support, are really good at doing this as well in terms of asking them questions. What are your audience looking for most? How can we answer that question? We don't have to tie everything back to certain volume. It's more about how natural communication and natural language is being used, and then how can we tie that into a prompt. We've got sort of a theory about sort of using the data we have available as well. So we have information from GA, so we know what traffic is coming from large language models at the moment. We have GSD data in terms of those landing pages we get the query data for, so we can see why people are coming into those sites from traditional search. And then we have the topical content, so we have the actual page content itself, which gives away sort of the types of things it could be appearing for. So if you combine that information together, you can just probably draw out sort of your core topics of what that page what the page's topical focus is. And then you can use that information to build some example prompts in terms of what that page could be driving traffic from in large language models. And then you can check the appearance, then like a manual check. And I know no one wants to be doing manual checks at this stage, and it will become semi-automated over time. But you can manually check across the models whether your theory is correct around those prompts that you just sort of mapped out. And if it is, you're probably increasing the likelihood and saying, we are likely to be appearing for this particular prompt. Maybe we want to track that over time, maybe we don't, but it's good sort of association in terms of why traffic is being driven from those large language models and what possibly they could be looking for. Why not perform user testing? So we look at user testing from a web perspective in terms of making sure that users can access the website. It's relatively cheap to do, and why don't we look at it from a perspective of large language models as well? If we're saying that more people are using this to make a decision, pay for user testing to go out, use ChatGPT or another model, ask them questions of like how they would find your product, what are they looking for in that particular product, and actually view what they do. That can give some really good information on sort of like what they're looking for, how a natural user would type that particular product, not knowing too much information. And again, that can really inform your strategy in terms of what you're looking to track over time. And then why not lean on AI? So why not actually use sort of these models to address what people could be looking for, how that natural language. Feeding this into a well-crafted GPT is something you could do in terms of making sure your ongoing process is thought out. So an example of that would be this prompt, which is saying that you're an expert prompt creator and all of that in terms of making sure that you're feeding in the right information and then getting the right results from it in terms of how you actually could create those prompts. And then internal sessions. So bring key stakeholders along for the journey. Everyone is asking about sort of AI search at the moment, how they're doing and how we're doing in AI search if it's your brand. Have a session. We do this a lot with sort of our empathy mapping sessions in terms of how do we define sort of who audiences are and then how do we create content off the back of that. It's similar for this in terms of how are people actually going to be searching? Do you all agree internally in terms of this is how people search and this is our sort of core USPs and what people would be looking for in our product? And if you bring them all along, that means that when you get to the result of actually putting this into reports, it all makes a lot more sense to everyone. And we'll do a quick recap here. So yeah, 2 key areas to track. So it's the brand entity focus and the prompt focus. The funnel model is really important. The 3 key categories we've got. You don't need to track everything all at once. I say get started with it more so. Get started with your core categories and then sort of evolve it as you go. Get your wider team involved and then experiment. You don't need LLM tracking models or tools to actually get started. You can do this yourself. Again, load up an incognito browser, write in a prompt. Does it display your information? Record that in an Excel sheet. Those are things that you can be doing. Again, we go back to, is it accurate? It's not 100% accurate, but it actually does give a good indication.
No, like Tom said, we think about prompt tracking as that level of how likely you are to appear for it. So LLM, specifically ChatGPT, remembers you. So it builds up like a profile of you, which you can actually view if you go into the settings and look at its memories. So for example, my login for ChatGPT knows I have a cat, and it knows how old it is, and it knows what color it is and what food it likes, and it knows my wife is vegetarian, and all this information, and it bases its responses on that. You're never going to be able to replicate that because it's unique to every user. But like we said, if you're tracking the right prompts at the right level, then you can suggest, actually, we are quite likely to appear when people are asking questions in our topic. So accurate, not highly accurate, but prompt tracking, even query tracking never really is. But you can get really good insights and just optimize your likelihood to appear when the queries are right for you. I want to go through some real world examples and things that we've done. Just quite quickly, and these are things that you should be able to do in relatively real time. Go into AI and check your best phrases. So find the topic that you operate in, the market you operate in, go straight into ChatGPT or Gemini or any other kind of models you're specifically looking at. We use ChatGPT traditionally because it's the most prominent of the options. Do a best search, see who appears. I mean, more often than not, it will be somewhere else. But by looking at who else is appearing and specifically the citations that it's getting its answers from, you can start to look at actually why are these other people appearing? Who do I need to reach out and contact? What type of content is appearing specifically for those and what's impacting that? Like I said, if your brand is not appearing for best phrases, it's often the case that your brand is not considered the best, which sounds kind of very simple. But best isn't, it's not a badge that someone's get, and it's kind of weird to think about it this way. We see a lot of LLM volume and Google search volume around best for these types of queries. We've had great success by kind of creating a subsection of your market. So if you are really good at one aspect, be it maybe you are the best customer service for your lease car dealership, stay so, make a page on it, kind of promote that, and it will get you in the mix. If you can accreditably say you are the best, and it can be a niche, you are the best for international students, you are the best for pet insurance. No, pet insurance is too high. Sorry, the best kind of for payouts on whatever policies you might hold. If you can promote that, you'll get put in the mix. AI never lists one person. Traditionally, it will list a number of things for a number of granular topics that it thinks people will find relevant to it. So, be your own biggest champion and find out what it is you are best at and promote that if possible to help kind of influence that response. We've said this before. Ask AI what it knows about your brand. It's not like traditional SEO. You can't ask Google everything it knows about you in a very linear way. LLMs, you kind of can. We've built GPTs that compare against competitors as well. And so the way they function is we put in, tell me what you know about this particular brand, and it will say, like in the screenshot, strengths it has, weaknesses, queries, and a score compared to the others as well. And these are all kind of non-highly specific, but it gives you a really good view of what LLMs think you're really good at and really poor at. Check that against yourself, because if it's saying, your website is terrible response rate to client comms, if that's not true, that's a note you can address. And you should be looking to. If there's incorrect information or even something that's really negative, if it's legitimate, if you do have a real problem with client comms and LLMs have spotted it, it highlights that that's something that you need to overcome and maybe a process change. LLMs typically like comparing things. So like I said, if you asked for the best restaurant near your current house, it will give you a range and tell the user what is good and bad about each one. It's in your interest to control what its critique is. If you can help bolster or defend against any kind of noteworthy critiques, and kind of allow it to say a critique that you know your users aren't going to find particularly problematic. That is exactly the approach we're looking at for it. So again, what LLMs know about your brand? You would be surprised when we check for clients and potential clients as a step one, what it knows about their brand. How many are just factually incorrect? LLMs say what it holistically thinks is to be accurate. Information could be really out of date on there. And if that is the case, you should be looking to address it. Do the search, ask what it knows about your brand, see what it's incorrect, find out where it's got the source for the citation, reach out and get it corrected, or put a better kind of flag on your own site to promote that as a more correct thing. Now, I'm not saying lie on your site, obviously, that's not what this call is. But if there's something on there that's incorrect and in your favor, maybe don't prioritize updating that. If there's anything problematic on there and that's impacting its your visibility across all fronts, absolutely get that addressed. And this really, really simple way of doing it. And again, reversing negative sentiment. You can also do it to your competitors. I saw a really interesting talk at Brighton SEO recently that specifically talked about looking at what your competitors were saying. Sorry, what LLMs thought critiques of your competitors were, and you should look at your own site in order to promote the negative. I keep defaulting to this slow response rate as my default, but if your competitors have a really slow response rate and you don't, make sure that you are kind of actively promoting that you have a really good response rate. It will help kind of put that balance when the LLM kind of puts out that information to show that you are different. It does a really good job at highlighting common complaints, LLMs. So absolutely take a look at it. And again, negative sentiment. Use this to your advantage by addressing it on your site. Clarify the conditions. How can you demonstrate your customer service skills? How can we better show dispute resolution? Just address those things that they are flagging and really push them forwards. If you're not being found on the kind of point you want to be, so best cars for electric lease deals in the UK, that is something worth tracking. This is an insight into our tracking tool itself. But again, you can do this as a one-off check just through the GPT itself. Better to track it over time as a one-off check. It's noteworthy to do. Conduct a site search. If you have a core prompt like this that you're looking to appear for, I know I talked about this in the past, and I know I've got some familiar faces on the call that no doubt fed up with me keep telling them to do site searches, but do the site search in Google. If you don't know how it works, like I said, site, your domain, space, the term you want to appear for. What it does is asks Google only to look at your site in reference to that query. It will tell you what pages Google, at least, and its Gemini product have the things that you have that are relevant to it. If it doesn't show a page that you think is highly relevant to it and addressing that particular query, so prompt, then make one. Or if you have a page that hasn't appeared, make sure it is appearing. Again, you can do this for competitors as well. So those there, so CarWow is appearing number 1, Lease Loco is appearing number 2. You can look at their versions of that query. So same site prefix, put in your competitor, see what they've got that's working in that similar way. In truth, when you kind of get to looking at your competitors, it's quite easy to see why they're doing that. So this is the Lease Loco page as a pure example that appears for that term. It's no surprise they're appearing for best terms, best prices in the H1 tag, best prices in the title tag in their meta descriptions, best deal in their descriptions. It's really easy to unpick what it is that's helping them perform from that perspective and emulate it. Cool. We finally got through. I appreciate everyone sticking around through our kind of technical difficulties. That is absolutely on me. And apologies for that again. Just some of the key takeaways more.
Yeah, the key takeaways, and we'll send this deck to everyone that's on the call anyway, but
yeah.
I think that the main thing is you're not behind. If you're in stage 1 and 2 right now of the maturity model, as it were, you're not behind. Going into 2026, we would expect sort of Q1, Q2, most people to get to that stage 3 in terms of actually let's start getting some tracking set up. Let's start looking at sort of our visibility in AI search. I think it's going to move quite quickly now. So it's important to have that on the radar and start to sort of look at it and invest into it in terms of what you need to know, and then how that builds back into sort of your overall organic strategy. You have data that you can use right now. So everyone has data they can use right now in terms of the tools they can track their GA, Adobe Analytics, whatever analytics tool you're using. You'll be able to see sort of what is coming to your website, and it's probably grown over the last 6 months, 12 months. So make sure you're looking at that data. What can it tell you about sort of how visible you are at the moment? What are the most likely pages that people are coming from? And then again, why? Ask questions like why are they coming to those pages and not my other pages? Have a robust plan in place. So make sure when you're getting sort of internal stakeholders on board and everyone on board with this, make sure that you get your tracking sorted out. Make sure you discuss prompts. Make sure you get good proportional representation of sort of the core categories you want to appear for, and make sure sort of you're looking at your brand results as well in terms of that whole brand entity management side of things. It's really important, as Will said, like it's amazing that AI gets things wrong because it's citing sources that you probably don't know exist or they're not on your radar. So make sure you're checking that. And then AI search visibility massively hinges on sort of those solid SEO foundations. The biggest thing for 2026 is invest in the areas you're not currently doing. So if you're not currently if you're producing content, but it's not overly sort of audience first content, or it's still sort of looking at traditional, let's go with a keyword and write content around that keyword, focus very much on the audience. Focus on sort of looking at it from an audience perspective first, and then put the keywords in for traditional search afterwards. If you're not doing digital PR, make sure you're looking at sort of digital PR. There's a whole host of people that aren't necessarily focused on this, or they have in-house teams. Make sure the in-house teams are talking to the SEO teams. There's themes and topics you'll want coverage for. There's probably benefits of sort of bringing those two together a lot more. And then the technical side of things, again, make sure solid technical foundations in place. You're pushing through priorities where you can. I think we've got a little bit of time for some questions. I think we've got a few in the chat already.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple I've been pulling out as I went along. Ryan, as the last ones, just pointed out that with the lease loco one, best prices is quite a well-regulated term with regards to the FCA. Ironically, lease loco isn't the best, so I feel like they might get a knock on the door if anyone flags that for them. I think that the kind of point to it is that was a very specific example, but best does feature quite heavily because of the comparison nature that LLMs frequently offer. Again, it's about finding if there's a way to kind of get that best accreditation. The best accreditation, I think, is going to be more and more powerful as it goes on. And that can take a lot of forms, like previously discussed. If you're kind of really highly rated on Trustpilot, for example, if you've got really good Google My Business, if you are the best post-service care, if you have any kind of aspect that you can claim that you are the best, lean into it more than you currently are, and kind of get that for it. I also saw a question from Wendy some time ago, and I didn't want to let it go without it. Wendy asked me if schema being used on video, specifically surrounding iframes, can negate that particular problem. Someone correct me if you have a different opinion, but I think video on pages is less important to LLMs because it's not actively watching the videos and things. That being said, schema on that page showing that you have a video has all the kind of associated SEO benefits and does give LLMs a sense of what is there. I'd focus more when I was talking about iframes on things like quizzes or interactive PDFs or the other things that you might want text.
If it can't view sort of what's on that page, if everything on that page is within the iframe, as Will said, like a quiz or something, then obviously you're gonna struggle for that appearance in both traditional organic search and AI search as well. We just had one through, what's the best metric for analysing AI search performance? So we're going with sort of the AI visibility metric is the main one. So if you're looking at all your prompts, and I think the most important thing to also note is when you're looking at setting up your prompt tracking, most tools allow you to add tags. Make sure you're adding those tags, because again, it's really important to look at brand versus non-brand. If you've got a prompt that's got a brand name in it, the likelihood that you're appearing for that is very high. So make sure you're separating the two out and even separating them into some core categories. But it's that AI visibility and it's that over time. So where we're looking at, or where we said prompt tracking on a daily basis is really important, is actually because, yeah, it does fluctuate and it does change. So have it set up so it's consistently collecting that data, and then you get that visibility score of sort of, in the last month, we've been visible sort of 75% of the time for this range of prompts or this individual prompt. So that's the main metric you're looking at the moment. Obviously, as we said before, go back to your main organic objectives in terms of, are we driving the right audiences to the website? Are they transacting? Are they giving us leads? Are they giving us revenue? You should see also maybe a natural increase in brand searches as well. So as you become more visible in AI search, you might see an increase in organic search for brand. So that could also be a metric that you want to be sort of keeping an eye on as well.
I've got a question following up on that YouTube one about whether transcripts on page would be beneficial when you put a YouTube video in an iframe. Oh, sorry, I thought you'd be just firm answer. Yes is the answer. That's beneficial for a variety of reasons. It will let kind of Google see the content better and index it. It gives you the opportunity to put internal links to other pages from an SEO perspective. But yeah, as you said, the LLMs will be able to more easily understand that. Where possible, where the videos don't add their own unique specific value that is video specific, I like to think of videos as summaries of content on your website.
Yeah.
I also saw, rewriting meta descriptions to optimize for LLMs. Should we be doing it for them all? And can we use AI to generate them? Do you want to take that?
Yeah, so meta descriptions are interesting because obviously the value in traditional search is very low, but they increase the click-through rate. I wouldn't go down the route of rewriting everything right now, like it's an indicator, and we've seen studies come out and say, oh, if you do rewrite them and have them more sort of user-focused, then they will sort of be picked up in LLMs. We have to marry that up with, we still want the click-through rate in organic search as well. The biggest thing is Google in organic search can change your meta description, so it can change it. We'd probably, yeah, with AI, we'd probably say the best way of doing it is making sure your page content and your meta description are saying similar things in terms of, is that opening paragraph on the page, does it match similar to what the sort of meta description says? Because also that first opening paragraph is something that gets picked up on as well. And again, it gets picked up on sort of the AI overviews, and it's about how it extracts that information. So small amounts of information that you can give sort of these AI models, making it really easy to pick up, is probably the way forward.
The way someone pointed out to me in a chat recently is it's kind of funny if you think about it. We've come almost full circle back to that, like literal newspaper opening paragraph gives a good synopsis of what the story is going to be, and then the details included after. Not a bad metaphor for it. A good solid approach.
We have one more question. I think it's about e-commerce, because e-commerce is going to be really interesting. So yeah, e-commerce so it's about e-commerce and prompt tracking, and if you have a ton of products, you're going to really scale your prompt tracking really quickly, and is it best to focus on brand? I'd say for e-commerce, definitely focus on the brand terms in terms of what AI knows about your brand, what are the trust signals it gives off. Your probably best bet is to go down the route of looking at where AI search traffic is coming from at the moment, in terms of, can you tell from LLM models in GA which landing pages or category pages are getting the most visibility. Start looking at those in terms of why they're getting the most visibility. Does it marry up very closely with sort of organic search? So does your category page or product page appear well in organic search as well, and that's why it appears in AI search? And then I'd probably go down twofold to saying, let's look at the ones that appear really well And then let's look at the ones that are appearing not so well in organic search and not driving much traffic from LLM models. And you can probably pull out sort of a few key categories to focus on in the first instance, and that's the first route you'd go down. It probably will expand over time in terms of number of prompts you're tracking, but really what you're trying to do is get a measurable cross-section of how your site's performing in LLM. The biggest thing for e-commerce, I guess, is this shift we're going to see in terms of adoption of sort of buying within the LLM model itself and sort of how that evolves over time. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. Focus on brand first, start off with sort of your core category pages in terms of what's performing well, what's not performing well, and then you can start answering that reason as to why, both reasons why.
Absolutely. We are going to leave the Zoom open. We are out of time now, but we'll leave it open. And if you have any additional questions or anything very granular or anything like that, drop them in the chat. We'll use it as a bit of a repository, and we'll get back to you regarding questions you have and follow up. We're turning this presentation into a PDF, and this time it won't have technical outages in the middle. But we'll distribute it to everyone on the call, make it available to you. If nothing else, you get a nice photo of me and Tom at the beginning, which is lovely. But yeah, thank you for coming.
No, thank you everyone for coming. We'll follow up if there's any specific questions. Feel free to reach out to us, and we can sort of help out where we can.
Yeah, absolutely.
But really appreciate it.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.